Welcome to Nailing the Brief. Thank you all for being here. We know it's the end of the day. Thank you for spending the time with us. We'll keep it brief. It's okay. I'm a dad. I can make dad jokes. Anyway, my name is Ben Hochstein. I'm an amateur comedian, but during the day, I'm a music supervisor. I've done a lot of stuff with Paramount, MTV, Netflix, and I've been doing briefs for, 12, 15 years, so I'm well qualified to read off this piece of paper and ask our esteemed panelists some questions. We have a really great group for you guys today. They've worked on everything from TV, film, ads, trailers, really across the whole spectrum of music supervision. And this is going to be a unique panel in that it's going to be a practical panel. It's going to have some really interesting information into sort of the daily routine of a music supervisor, what they go through, how they actually find the music. People say to me, how do you find, the perfect song for the perfect scene? And unfortunately, it's not because we're geniuses. It's because, we do these things called briefs. We do searches, and we're able to sort of communicate an idea, a song, a sound in our head to somebody else, written down, and then get the song back. When I did my first brief, I said, hey, give me indie rock. And I got a bunch of, Sum 41 type sounding stuff. Gives you the idea of the era. And I was like, no, guys, I wanted, clap your hands and say, yeah, not this. So, I sort of learned, hey, when you do a brief, it's a lot more detailed and involved than you think to really sort of get across what you're looking for. And a lot of times it's not just we need rock or we need songs that sound like this that cost less. It's how do we turn on a plot point? How do we build this character? It can get complicated. And it's like, how do you express that? So hopefully today you'll learn a little bit more about, what works in a brief, what doesn't work, when you send them. And then if you're on the other side of pitching music, maybe what supervisors are looking for when they send those off. So I want to start with our first panelist, Natalie Montgomery here. She has worked in ads, TV. She worked for Mark Mothersbaugh, where I got to work with her, who was an amazing composer, had a little band called Devo you might have heard of. They were kind of big back in the day. And now she's doing a lot of television shows. And so we kind of wanted to hear, Natalie, I know you told me earlier that you have sort of a unique approach when you do a brief. And so we'd love to sort of hear your process. When do you send it? Is it a PowerPoint? Is it an email? Is it a diorama? What is it? What do you send? How do you do it? How would you approach a new project?
Hi. So I work out of my home by myself, like many of us have. And I just recently brought in a coordinator to improve my briefs so that I'm giving you more to work from as publishers and labels. But essentially, what I've done in the past, because of how fast the shows I work on, sometimes they have 10 to 11 songs in an episode, plus an on-camera, plus maybe a pre-record. And maybe I spot and have 4 days in between a spot and a mix. So I have had to already pitch the music, cleared it, sometimes cleared more than I need to, in order, before I even get to the part where maybe I'm going to send out a brief. And usually it's based upon an editor or a director or the showrunner and what I know they want and what I know I'm lacking from what I've already sent. So sometimes the brief is scene specific, and I will just give you as much as I can, the scene description, what it's like, and I'll lay out kind of a visual as well, because I work really in a visual way. So I may not say, I want hand claps, or I want this instrumentation, or send you a reference. I will sometimes more let you into that character or what they're thinking or what they're going to be doing in the scene and what they might be doing 2 episodes ahead. And that's how I will build out a brief. It's more character-based, sometimes more than it is scene-driven, because the scene will change so much between each cut, each impression. And so that's kind of a...
Do you like to keep it really specific? Like, I want 70s funk, or I want this? Or do you like to just keep it more open, say, this scene should express this character's feelings, any genre?
My genre is somewhat specific due to the network and type of shows I work on, but I try to leave it open. I find that when I went specific, I would get tracks where maybe 1 out of the 20 would actually work. The less specific I got, the more those tracks would not only end up in the scene I asked for, or for the show or the episode I was thinking, they also get tagged and dragged, as I say, into multiple playlists and sent to multiple editors so that they then carry forth those songs into the next show they do, the next project they do.
That's a good point. So almost more broad actually helped you get better music.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay, well, thank you. And now we're going to move on to the end to Susan Dolan. Apologies. She's worked on many projects. She's worked in TV as well, but you do a lot of advertising. I see here big stuff from, what do we got here? Nike, Target, Mitsubishi, Southwest. So very big brands that you're working with. So that's maybe the TV side. How does it work on the ad side? Is that different on the TV side? Are you going out to people asking for songs?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. I'm always really, I'm so grateful for, all of you out there who pitch music. I usually, every search I do, I tend to reach out to, my trusted sources, my partners out there, and to supplement ideas that I may have. Advertising tends to be a little bit different than my experience with TV. I mean, usually for a scene, it can be 3 to 10 choices can be expected for a scene. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but in advertising, my pool will usually entail like 20 to 25 options for my client. So I really need to think like, okay, when I get a project, what are the different directions that could possibly happen with this? I certainly want to cover off on what my client is asking for, but I also feel like part of my job is to kind of test that vision and maybe pull some options that are a little bit out of the box for them. So I in turn relay that to the labels and publishers and reps out there, because I hope that they do the same thing for me. Like, I'm going to give you specifics, but I would love for you to also provide me with directions that I haven't thought of yet. So going along with what Natalie was suggesting, it's kind of like the more you want to be specifically broad, which I know that sounds really weird. It's like oxymoron, but you don't want to go too broad with your brief, because it's actually easier for someone to do a search if there are some parameters in place. But broad is good, because we all go down paths in our creative minds. When it comes to pulling music, there are lots of different ways you can take it. And I certainly don't want to give my client 20 to 25 options that are exactly the same. You got to switch it up and give some range.
And that's, I tell when I go out to labels and publishers, I always say, hey, if you've got something kind of maybe out of the box, but you think it's a really good song, or, feel free to stretch that creative muscle. And a lot of times it's those sort of wild cards that end up being, what you're going to use. So if you're pitching music, I say, maybe, note that and say, hey, I know this might be a little out there, just so I don't think that you're not reading the brief or that you don't know what you're doing. But, note that, but always feel free to send a little wild card, because those are always, the nice little surprises that we get. All right, well, now let's go to the trailer world with Scenery here, who's worked on many great shows, Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which I loved as well, and now she's doing trailer work, and you brought a clip for us today, correct? You want to set that up?
Sure. So this is actually our trailer for Sydney, which is an Apple TV Plus film about Sidney Poitier. I brought this because it made Oprah cry, so I'm proud. However, she cries in the trailer and she cries in the film, so I'm like, maybe she just cries a lot. But you can all watch it on YouTube. But basically, we ended up using 2 songs. The first one was Michael Kiwanuka, Black Man in a White World, and then it goes into Marvin Gaye's Mercy, Mercy Me. And with trailers, it's kind of we are always going to want something big and recognizable, because we want something that's going to sell the film, and we want to satisfy the client, and they also want something that's going to sell the film, which mostly means a bigger artist. The problem that we get is they always want something that's like Beyonce, the Rolling Stones. And when you want something that's a huge caliber artist, your pool becomes smaller and smaller and smaller, because it's like, who's bigger than Beyonce? Who's bigger than the Beatles? Like, so frequently when we're going to our people, you know, we tend to go to like the people that we know are going to have the stuff that we need for that particular project. And it depends, you know, each project is different, but we always ask people like, well, do you have any trailerized remixes of, you know, this iconic song that everybody knows? Because we want to see something unique and original and new and fresh, but, you know, people want that recognizable thing that's going to like instantly make them want to go see the film. So it is kind of a tricky challenge. But, you know, we also work on lots of indie films that, you know, also want like, you know, maybe like an indie artist, you know, remaking like a famous, you know, known song like by the Cars or something like that. So we're kind of, I guess we're always like looking for, you know, a fresh take on something that's like kind of recognizable and beloved.
Especially now, I mean, this has been a trend for a while, but trailers always try to find that really out there, you know, what you wouldn't expect, almost counterintuitive, you know, let's play a really slow folk song over an action movie trailer, stuff like that. How do you begin to conceive? Is that coming from the studio? Is that coming from the music supervisor? There's really creative work being done in that sense with trailers. Could you talk a little bit about how those choices are made?
Yeah, I mean, the first step of our process is like we always watch the thing, you know, we always watch the feature or the TV show, and we kind of put together a sonic palette, like, you know, oh, this is this kind of a character, we get into the psychology of it, like, you know, we're working on something with Natasha Lyonne, you know, and it's like, okay, badass, like swaggery, you know, female fronted. So we kind of do like a little deep, you know, initial pull between myself and Greg Sweeney, who's my counterpart in the music department. And then we take those ideas to our producers, and we kind of wait for feedback. And then it's always like a conversation between the producers and the editors. And then from there, we kind of figure out what's fitting, what's, you know, what the client's liking. And it's just like a process from there.
When you go out with your briefs, do you mention budget? I know when I do TV briefs, it's very much budget driven. I'm like, it has to be under this amount of money, guys. But I know when you guys go out in trailers, you're not really concerned about that, and advertising, anyone can jump in. Yeah.
Yeah, budgets are definitely, if you have the budget, and particularly if there's a budget constraint, it's good to disclose that, because you can really help your client streamline the process. But you know, going back to what I was saying earlier about wildcards and this and that, I always appreciate it when someone, you know, if you have the perfect song, but it's not going to be within budget, maybe just a little bit outside of the budget, like please send it, and just with that caveat, of course, because you never know.
Okay, thanks. Next we have a final panelist, last but not least, Danica Bates from Paramount. She's in charge of all the promotion that you see on the channel for the various networks. Thank you for being here. So talk to me a little bit about promo. That's, you know, an area that sometimes will cross over with the TV supervisor. When you go out for briefs, are you going out for briefs as much? Do you have sort of a collection of, oh, these are the cool songs we want to get in, this is what's big on TikTok, this is what we want? Or are you sort of approaching each project like a trailer would or an ad would?
Yeah, I think so. I work at Paramount, which is formerly Viacom. So I work on a wide range of networks like Nickelodeon, Paramount Network. We now have Paramount Plus, Comedy Central, MTV, VH1. So there's a really wide range of what we're looking for at any given time. So I do tend to go out for briefs quite a bit, but the thing about working in-house is you develop relationships with creative directors. So you're having conversations really early on where you're pulling your own music and pitching it and kind of getting ideas, getting inspired, getting directions. Sometimes you are jumping off of something that has been placed in the series itself. So we have that kind of creative exploration to begin with. And then we always kind of want to dive a bit deeper and create a brief that for me, I also am trying to find that balance of being specific, but not kind of eliminating songs that would work really well. So it's just always knowing when to get specific and when to keep it broad. I'm also a big fan of the wild card. I feel like I said, promos there's a wide range of what the needs are, but I feel like it's a bit similar to the trailer world in that we're always looking for something that's dynamic. You'll hear that word like over and over again, changes, builds, peaks and valleys. If we're looking for vocal tracks, we're looking oftentimes for something that swells or crescendos. So it's just kind of all over the place. And I feel like the strategy is being clear enough, mentioning subgenres when when they're relevant, especially to a series that's maybe like a period piece. And I do mention budget usage. I try to relay as much information as possible. And I also ask that the licensors disclose to me if they know that there's any clearance issues. So just kind of reminding them, let me know if this is splits pending, like they're not finalized yet, or if there's maybe a co-publisher that isn't super fast to clear their percentage, or any number of things.
If you want to know what keeps a music supervisor up at night, it's splits TBD. So we love it when you know the splits at a time. This is for anyone that wants to answer. When you send out a brief and you get music back, do you put a limit on how many songs someone should send? Do you just want all that might apply? Do you want to get 500 songs back? Do you want to get 5 back? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I know. For me, if I'm sending out something super specific, I don't limit it because I know that I'm not going to get too many options back. Like if I'm looking for a specific cover or something like that. But if it's something broader, then I usually say, like, I would love 10 of your best options. It's usually how I phrase it.
For me, it's, 20, 25, 30 is probably, because we also start to get listener fatigue. So if we have a bin of like 100 songs to go through, we have that times however many, like 100 submissions, or can be more, can be less. So we do tend to get a little bit of listener fatigue. So I think quantity or quality over quantity is usually what I prefer.
I'm going to chime in because I have so much music to place and very quickly. When it's specific, yeah, I think you're best. But also, again, more for me because, I might get listener fatigue if I tried to listen to it all right then. But I will pull it into another folder to forward for another search so that when I'm asking for briefs, I may not go out to 20. I'm going to go to who I think can nail it. Not to, pun intended, but as well. So that helps.
And again, for anyone, when you're trying to get that particular sound or song, do you send other songs and say, hey, this is an example? Do you stay away from that? Do you try to describe what you want? I always try to, when I can, send a song because I feel like I can't really explain it correctly. Like I said, with the indie rock thing kind of taught me that indie rock means a lot of things to a lot of people. So I often try to say, hey, this song, but I think even then there's complications because they might be hearing, the drums in it and you might be hearing the vocals. So talk to me about that. Do we actually use music or do we just describe it?
I mean, I've made mistakes with this in the past, so I'll just jump in.
We like to hear about mistakes. Those are good learning moments.
I say if you're looking for an alternate to a Beyonce track or something, go ahead and send the track. But if there's just one component to that Beyonce track that you're liking and you're including it in the brief to demonstrate that, maybe include 2 other options so that the recipient has something to triangulate, like an approach. Because the mistake I've made in the past is, hey, look, actually, I can think there was an opening to a movie I worked on, and the director really liked the pacing and the overall vibe of Bittersweet Symphony. And I try to explain that in the brief. Like we're looking for a song, like not necessarily like in this genre, but it has like the certain kind of like footstep, kind of like swagger pace. But really what I got back was just a ton of alternates to Bittersweet Symphony, and that wasn't necessarily what I wanted. So I made that mistake. I think like moving forward, just be careful when you're including a link, and be aware that you might be just getting exactly that in different form.
I mean, we tend to be really specific at Motive, where I'm at now, but also like I can speak to how, when I worked with Jen Ross, for example, like her briefs are like extremely specific, and they're quite long, and they include, a budget parameter. They include like, this is a ref, this is a YouTube link, here are, artists in the similar wheelhouse. She tends to be very, very, very specific. But again, like if you want to send stuff that's a wild card, that's also welcome too, because we save everything and nothing is wasted. Like it all goes into submission folders, and inevitably we'll have another project where we'll go back into the submission folders and we'll comb through everything again very extensively. So it's not a waste of time to send stuff. However, we do appreciate when people are like, hey, I don't have anything for this right now, because it's like, that's we don't want to waste your time, and we don't want our time to be wasted either.
I think that's a good point too, is we're trying to build, as supervisors, we're trying to build relationships with people who provide music, and we want to trust your taste too. There's certain pitchers that I feel have better taste than others, and I know I can go to them. So it's always good that, maybe you have priorities that you have to push, but let people know that, so they can sort of learn your taste and trust you. Were you going to say something, Natalie?
Yeah, I was just going to say that's one of the most valuable lessons as I was figuring out my way and making mistakes as well, was just how much experience everyone has that's pitching this music, more than I do in some cases. And to me, they're an extension of music supervision. They're being so thoughtful. They're putting so much time. Sometimes they're pitching artists, and even within an hour, even if they've had something on hold, they're sending me something back because they know how quickly I have to work. And that is the only thing that really gets the brief, is if you get it to me fast enough. Because otherwise you're always succeeding. Everything you send is, oh my gosh, look at their perspective of how you've come to approach. And it really allows me to do what she spoke about, triangulating, so that someone can be like, the only way they're going to like a song is if you give them some songs they might not like, or that might be unexpected. We all have different ways in which we do that, but that's a really important thing that everyone should know, is that every submission counts for something towards what we're doing.
And then we turn around and have to then pitch it to other producer, showrunner, director, but we at least get to know what ends up working. Whereas people that are pitching the music, if they get a request maybe, but otherwise they never know. So I would say as supervisors, it's good to give feedback as well when you can. I could do this better myself, but we don't have a lot of time, but right, if you can, I think give some feedback. Oh, that was great, or I love this song, just to kind of help the pitcher have some idea of what maybe is working, what isn't working. I think that helps you in the long run, right? That wasn't really a question. I apologize.
That's how my best relationships have been developed and saved the day,
definitely.
right?
Yeah.
I think it's a two-way street too. I love when licensors come back to me and our music partners, and they ask me to elaborate on something, and they're like, I can interpret this in a couple ways. Like, what exactly did you mean here? I really do love that, because I know that they're taking my brief seriously and they want to pitch the best options. So yeah, it's a dialogue.
Great. I think now we'll go to my clip so we can show you something, right? And not hear us talk all the time. We're switching over. Thank you for bearing with us. So this clip is from a show called Boo Bitch, which was on Netflix, starring Lana Condor right here. It's a YA comedy type drama show, and this was for a song that was going to exist in the show many times. I think we ended up using it 7 times in an 8-episode series. So a lot of times it was sort of like the show's about two two seniors in high school, and they're trying to, live their best life in their senior year, and one of them ends up dying and becoming a ghost, and the complications that presents. But so this was sort of the best friend theme that we were trying to find that would sort of, recur throughout. And so it was a very broad kind of ask, right? It was like the best friend theme. What could that be? What do high school girls listen to? Like Playboy Cardi? I don't know. But, that's not what we want to put on our show, right? So I have to think about my showrunner who likes, the music she liked was a little more lighter, a little more funkier, not hardcore rap. So we had to sort of figure that out. So what was sort of, the sound of the show, but what would be believable that the girls would be listening to? Of course, we're dealing in sort of contemporary music. So we're looking for something current. Now with Netflix shows, we work on them. They come out a year later because they got to transfer them into, 100 different languages. So we didn't want a song that was going to be, played out by then. So we were trying to find something new. So it's all these kind of parameters. And, I sent out a brief. I got some stuff back. It probably wasn't the best brief. It was probably kind of vague. I didn't love anything. I used it. We ended up using songs from the brief in the rest of the show, but I wasn't really finding it. The deadline was coming. And someone sent me, they said, hey, this might not work for your brief. Because I was asking for like songs about friendship, lyrically. She's like, this might not work, but this is a really good album from an artist called Remy Wolf that's coming out. So I was like, oh, okay, let me listen to that. And the sound was great. Like every song had a great sound to it. I was like, this is perfect. Like I like this. I think it plays for the girls would like it. And, the lyrics of the song we chose didn't really work. Well, I'll tell you, let's watch the clip and then we'll come back. So, the show is streaming now if you want to check it out. So yeah, again, what I was saying about the lyrics, they're talking about East Side guys and Gorilla. I'm like, this is not really the friendship theme, but, it was the best song on the album, I thought. There were others that maybe worked better for the friendship idea. So I was like, I'm just going to send a couple of them. And the showrunners from the beginning loved that song. We even talked about maybe creating a song for the show with Netflix, but once the showrunners heard this was the song, and so that's kind of how this song came to be. It was sort of that, almost like that wild card again, that was just kind of pitched to us, and it came together really well. But the brief wasn't a total waste because, like I said, we found other songs that work for the show. So yeah, that's Boo Bitch for you. Let's see, do we maybe want to take some questions from the audience? Does anyone have any areas you'd like us to hit more specifically? Sir, right here in the...
I have a question. So the work that I've done with music supervisors in the past has all been them calling me. So it's been custom stuff with relationships that I've already had. What is your take on cold call, new talent, people you've never worked with, that kind of thing, given that you get so much music every day?
That's a good one. The question was, how do you feel about cold calls from pitchers?
Don't call me.
Just no.
Don't call me sweetheart. Don't call me honey, and don't try to invite me to lunch. Sorry. But it's true. These are important things as I've come up and what's comfortable to me. And emails, I try to listen to everything, and any way you can get to me is fair. How else are we going to find it if there's so much music? So I don't care how you get it to me, but preferably email.
I would agree with that. I do not like to be called and I don't mean that to be rude, but most of the time we're under very stressful deadlines, and you never know what's going on with somebody on the other side of the phone. And in my personal experience, it's better to email the person so that they can then respond on their own time, because it's more respectful. Cold emails just don't go over well with me.
Yeah, I think if you're intentional, I mean, I agree. Like, I don't answer my phone even for my family members. Like, I hate talking on the phone. But I think if you email me, I'm totally open to it as long as it's targeted. Like, you kind of you acknowledge what we're working on, what's greenlit, what's in the slate, what I'm probably working on for promos. That will definitely cut through some of the other just random emails that we get.
Yeah, same. Don't like the phone. Prefer emails, and be intentional. I agree with all of that.
And send music the first time around. Don't ask what I'm working on because you can look that up.
Yeah, and don't ask if you can send music because then
Don't
there's
do
just
that.
one more email. Hey, here's some music when you have a chance. Make sure the link works.
And send downloadable files. Watermarked files we can't send to editors. I mean, I know that sometimes we have
Can
to.
you not?
It's problematic because I sometimes have a music editor and editor that want to dive in right away. So I just need it all right away. I can't wait till I've cleared it to get the wave sometimes or the instrumental. So
It's good to know, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you like all the stems up front, or would you rather prefer to ask for those?
my editor would prefer that I send stems to every single song every single time.
Yeah.
But I wait and I ask.
Yeah, don't send waves or stems right off the bat for us, because we usually, if we need them, we're going to ask. So it's, you know.
I agree with that. The waves take
Same.
up too much room and,
Yeah.
take too long to download.
Disco.
Disco is great, yeah. Do you have a preferred method of getting pitches other than disco, or that seems to be the popular one?
We like disco. When I worked with Jen Ross, she pretty much just uses Dropbox. And a lot of supervisors are very kind of like, if you've been doing it for a long time, you're set in your ways, you have a method that works. You know, a lot of people don't want to rock the boat and change up their methodology. But disco is amazing. I love it.
Agree. I love disco, but we actually subscribe to disco. So I have my inbox. So if you don't do disco, whenever I send out my brief, I include a link to my inbox where you can upload your files. So that helps a lot.
That's interesting.
That's a good idea.
Over here, we have a question.
Katie, you mentioned that you in the past save stuff from pitches and kind of go back through it. Do tags factor into that? Do you search for particular tags, keywords, things like that within disco or anything?
The question is, are tags helpful on songs that come through for future searches?
Yeah. I think it's a good idea to put it in your email, like, recommended if you like, or sounds like, because then if I'm looking, I'm like, I need something that's like, I don't know, like the Cars, like the Cars. And anything that comes up, that's not a good example because it could be anything related to cars. But it's a good example of like how we do searches. If you put it in the email, it'll come up. Or if it's in disco, it'll come up.
Yeah, I search my email all the time. I have a folder with just all of the email blasts that I get, even if they're not targeted to a specific brief. And if there are keywords, it helps me so much to find it. And another tip there would be to make it so that your links don't expire, because I'm probably looking back in emails that I got like a year or 2, 3 years ago and clicking on those links.
Are we okay with like multiple songs? Like, let's say I pitch something and then 2 months later I have something else and then I have a song that would work. Personally, I do a poor job of, keeping my old pitches. So I always like to get, even if you send it before to me, I like to get it again. But what's sort of the panel's consensus on that?
With disco, it does, now that I have help with coordination, it does create duplication issues, which then create extra work. But it's good for me because I may have forgotten. But now with disco, I will say it's not needed as much because it's already in there. And then I add my own tags as well with everything that's sent, so that I have my own keywords because I search differently than maybe what's in there.
And then I wanted to ask a question from the perspective of like a new music supervisor. If I'm out here, I have a project, I haven't really done this. Should I do a brief on every show? Should I try to find stuff first? How do you approach it from the very beginning of a show? Do I wait for scenes like we were saying to pitch for that? Or do I just say, hey, I need a general idea of this type of music for the show? Do I then go back and do other briefs? Talk to me as if step by step, if I'm just approaching a show, briefs for dummies, from step 1 through 10. You don't have to have 10 steps, though.
I mean, So we always kind of try to be proactive, like we're being proactive and reactive. So, we're doing initial polls, but we're also sending out briefs so that like when we go through our initial polls, we always have something on the back burner, or like we like to stock our cupboards, so to speak, so that, we will go through everything, but we also want to make sure that there is stuff that is still coming in so that when, we never run dry of options, I guess. That's not step 1 through 10, but.
Does anyone else want to tackle that before we go to the question?
I was just going to say, I mean, in the promo world, it runs pretty quickly. So depending on how much time I have, I pretty much just send briefs out at the same time that I'm searching myself, and just want to have like options in the hopper. And I know my creatives like to chew through a couple playlists before 2, 3, 4, 5 playlists before they ultimately land on something. So yeah.
I give myself like an hour of like to do my own search first, because I feel like I get information from doing that. Before I start going out to people, I'm like in the information gathering phase. And then I feel like I can more intelligently put together a brief once I get the terrain of, learn the, whatever the expression is, lay of the land.
Yeah. I personally, I do a lot of reality shows as well. So I like to sort of go into my briefs with, hey, I need music for this section, intro, character, dates, breakups, and then say, hey, can you pitch me in these categories? Give me songs that fit these categories that are, in such and such genre. Obviously, money is always important in reality briefs, like keep it under this amount. But I like to actually have people group the music ahead of time for me, because that's helpful, because I'm going through so much music. So if you're doing briefs, I think in that sense, be more specific. It's okay to ask for, just general songs and wild cards. But if I was a new supervisor, I would say really think about your show, how you're going to use music. Is there characters? Do we want to do a playlist for each character and then ask people to pitch for each character? Do we have certain moments that happen in every show or that we already know from our scripts are going to happen, so we can pitch to those? But so I would say put all of that information up front, so then when you're getting music back, it's already, sort of in categories for you, rather than, send me 5,000 songs and then I'll go sort them into each of my little categories. So that's something I would recommend.
I would say for TV film world, it's really unique. It depends on who's brought you in. So for me, it's showrunner or an EP. You really want to develop that relationship with what they want, but you also have to realize that the editorial is working through every cut. They're spending the most time with the EPs. And so when I first broke into this world with all the other backgrounds, I got to really know the editors. And that has been a key to my success with getting the briefs through, is gaining their trust as well, especially when I started out. And those relationships have taken me into how I work now. Donuts work really well. Visiting them before, when we could, they really are another part of that music team that I don't think people talk. We all know this, but they don't talk about it a lot. So, yeah.
You don't want pitchers visiting you with donuts, right?
What?
You don't want people who pitch music to visit you, right?
No, but this would be for if you're starting
team.
out, internal. Get to know and find the people that are pitching you that you feel like you can trust, even if you're like, gosh, they email me once a week. I ended up receiving and starting working with that person more and more and more, and I'm like, they have so much I never even knew about. And if I had let the fact that they were emailing me once a week be a deterrent, that would have been a terrible mistake on my part. Yeah. So,
I would say if you're on the pitching side and you just sent something in a blast and I 2 days later asked for a brief, don't assume I got it from your blast. Please, resend it. I like to err on the side of sending stuff more than once. I don't mind it personally. I like to be reminded. I like to hear it again. I'm like, oh yeah, that song. So don't assume that we've listened to all of your blasts. You probably don't, but we get a lot. We get thousands of emails a day, so we do our best. But feel free to highlight certain songs again. Do you have a question here earlier?
Yeah, sure. If I've been included in a brief, and I know there's a lot of other people too, do you like me, if I don't have anything for the brief, do you like me to send you an email to say I don't? Or does that just make you have to read one more email? If I don't send it, do you assume, oh, they didn't have anything?
The question is, if I don't have anything, do I stay quiet or do I say that? Thoughts?
I like when people are just like, hey, I don't have anything for this right now. Because then I'll be like, hey, why didn't that person send? Did you get it? Or, because a lot of times we will send it to specific people, and sometimes we'll get emails like, hey, I wasn't included on your brief. Why wasn't I included? And we're like, well, we had a specific purpose in mind when we sent this, and we know that you don't have this. So it's kind of like, we are thinking about you. We're not just like necessarily like blasting everyone we know with it. So if you send us an email back like, hey, I'm sorry, I don't have anything, then I'll be like, okay, cool. And I'll, file it away for next time.
I agree.
That, yeah.
Completely. My brief list is like very targeted, and it's not that many people. So if I don't hear from somebody, I'm like, did they not are they just not, they're too busy for my briefs?
Yeah.
So it's nice to
funny.
hear.
We don't want to hear from you. And then in that moment, we really want to hear from you. And sometimes I'm like, I'll even say, I know you might not have something that I want, but I came to you for that reason. So what are you excited about right now? What's something you sent out yesterday to somebody? I just need anything to just push those creative juices.
When you send a brief, what's your expectation of how long it will take to get music back? Or do you put a deadline on it?
I usually put a deadline.
I put a deadline, and I try to be careful with the deadline. Like, I don't want to give too much time, because then I think it can go back burner. And if I give too little time, it can be rushed. So I try to do 24 hours if I can.
24 hours, okay.
Yeah, I feel like that's a sweet spot.
It depends on our timeline. Like, we always like to give the person as much time as possible. Like, if we have 2 weeks, if we have a week, like, amazing. Then you have time, we have time. Because we know that when we're in that crunch period, if we're like, hey, we need this tonight, we need this end of day, we need this tomorrow, we're pulling so many favors that, like, if we can give you a little bit of extra time, we absolutely will.
Well, I'd like to apologize because I don't give that much time, because just due to how fast I'm working in TV. It's like a film a week. But I do try, when it's urgent, to say, this isn't urgent, just throw some things at me, or I will say, I won't put a timeline. And that means that I'm being thoughtful and I'm thinking about it for a few weeks in advance, or for an episode that I know is coming down the line, and I'm just wanting to stock up my cupboards, as you said.
What's urgent? Like an hour, 2 hours, for you, 2 hours? If I'm a supervisor?
Sometimes my relationships, and I don't like that this is how it started, but the quicker the briefs would come back, or tracks would come back, and the more quickly they would nail it and discuss with me, or even say, do you want to talk about it? Those are people that I would continue to go back with. If someone waits 3 days and they know I'm on a show with the timeline I have, I feel really bad, but that's not going to get in that show, and might not get in the next or the next, because I am 3 or 4 episodes down the line in 2 days. You
said something interesting, that you like to talk about it with people. If you're a supervisor and you're going out for a brief, is that, and maybe you're just going to like 5 people, is that something you do? Do you call them and talk them through it? Do you find that helpful, or do you like to keep it on email?
I tend to keep it on email for the most part, but if there's like a special boutique catalog where I know that they have what I'm looking for, but they may not have sent it, like, I will talk it through with them and kind of figure out, like, if I can just explain a little bit more, can they dig a little deeper?
Email, unless something is like very nuanced, or like, I don't know, confidential, something going on like there, I might do a phone-to-phone type of thing, but for the most part, email.
Yeah, go ahead.
Email.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's mostly email, but I've found too, sometimes it helps to call and talk through, and you're like, oh, this person's not quite thinking about the same music I am. No, I mean this song. I'm like, oh, okay, now I get it. So sometimes I find that helpful to call. Right here. The question is, do we send briefs to just artists, not labels or publishers, but just specific artists?
Can we admit to it?
No.
I am starting to do that, but I want to be respectful to the people that I work with that have already worked really hard to bring these groups of people together. But the more I work with them, obviously there's sync camps. Those are very successful to me for what I do. So I guess that's how I would speak to them.
I don't typically just email artists, just because like we're looking for kind of a lot of stuff. So it just doesn't seem like we would get enough material that we could use, unless it's something really specific. Unless I'm like, I'm only going to this person because they specialize in this thing. And with trailers, like we do tend to go to specific composers that we know, like, Alistair X at the Crystal Creative, like does hip hop trailerization really well. So, we go to specific composers for that, but not necessarily like artists.
I tend to agree. I can't remember the last time I went directly to an artist, but do go out to composers quite a bit.
Or maybe your sound is good for the show. We'd go out and ask you. But it sounds like a lot of the times we're sending briefs for more specific needs. It sounds like scenes or stuff like that. You mentioned something interesting, the sync camps. And I think we're finding that more and more, that songs are being created for TV, for film, for advertising. And sometimes as supervisors, we get asked, hey, what are you looking for? Send us a brief so we can make you a song. Let's talk about those quickly. Do you approach those differently when you're sending to actually make a song versus find a song? Are there anything in particular you might put in that? If I'm a supervisor and I'm asked to, hey, send a brief to make an original, something that might be helpful.
Well, I can speak to trailerization. Like usually we will go to like this 5 or 6 composers that we know can do a really good job. And we'll get like 1 or 2 different looks per trailerization. And so I guess we then see like what's working best with the cut, and then we kind of go from there. But it's definitely like a trial and error process.
Yeah, I mean, there are times where, writing a brief for an original song is different than looking for an existing song. In that case, I would probably include more examples to help, inspire them, or at least set them down the right path, to give them as much guidance as possible.
Yeah, I agree. I think that for me, when I'm working on custom, I spend a lot more time with my internal creatives to really nail down what they're looking for, because when you move into the custom world and you have a composer start demoing, like you're incurring fees. So you really want to make sure that you know exactly what your creative team is interested in before you get started on actually composing.
Yeah, no, I always find it challenging when a song is being created to sort of get across, what I'm looking for. It's hard enough with existing songs, but now people are actually going to make it for you. So like, I don't want to mess this up. This is specifically for me. But yeah, I like to give examples, like say, hey, I really like what they do in this song, but very specific. Like I like, this 30-second piece. I really like that. And just give examples, but be specific. So people aren't picking up on things that, you're not picking up on necessarily. Anyone else in the audience? Right up front here. How are you?
Just a really good question. How important is metadata and making sure to send it in the beginning so that you know if there are other entities that might be associated with the song that could be part of the
Metadata and maybe publishing information in that metadata. Do we like that? Do we not care?
Because of the fast pace, I will admit I have someone who helps me clear that's amazing and talented, and that metadata is what I use to provide and give her the ability to get through and work as quickly as she does. So it's really crucial. Even though she knows and has all the relationships, it's still really important.
Crucial is a good word, I think, especially for my area, promos. It's like so fast moving. We can't spend a lot of time on research.
It's certainly helpful. For me personally, I have my weird idiosyncratic ways of filing, so I feel like I'm not helpless in those situations where there is no metadata, but it certainly does not hurt to include as much as possible. I mean, I would love you for it if I had all of the splits right there and who to contact. And if it's not there, sometimes I'll try to manually do it myself, but it's very, very appreciated when it's there.
Yeah, especially if you're in a time crunch and you're maybe between two songs and one you're like in the metadata, it's like one stop. I'm like, oh, I like that. You know, I clear this in an hour. So I think it only helps you. One stop, you know, easy two stop, stuff like that. Or, you know, 50% is, you know, universal music publishing, you know, that always helps to know up front. Right here.
Yeah, follow-up question about metadata. So with when I'm pitching covers or when I'm putting cover information in the metadata, sometimes it's very hard to track down who the publishers actually are or who the right people are. I don't, as a agent, I don't typically rep for covers. I don't rep the publishing side, obviously, because I don't, you know, I don't represent Warner Chappelle or whatever. Yeah. So, you know, how much leeway we have there if it's like a famous song and, you know, for you to be able to figure out how to clear the publishing for like an Elvis song.
Yeah, I don't think it's really your responsibility if it's a known song, if it's an Elvis song. If you're pitching covers, it's not your responsibility to track all that down, right?
Right, I would agree with that. We have our ways of finding that out, but if you indicate that it is a cover, that's helpful, because if it's not like a super well-known Elvis song, might miss that one.
Yeah, then we get in big trouble. Right here.
Yeah, if it just has like a, you know, the same name or something like that, and we're like, we don't recognize it right off the bat. It's, yeah, definitely like put cover in the title.
Is there a no cover list? Like where you know, there's some bands and artists that are like, yeah, we don't do it. We don't, you know, monetize or sync. We don't do that. You know, an artist can put a track together, work so hard on it, and that band was never gonna allow it to happen. So is there a no-fly zone for?
There is, and for $9.99 you can subscribe to the that's a tough one. Yeah, anyone.
It depends. I mean, I've been able to clear some really amazing artists on the shows that I've worked on, but I still don't. If we're going to go for the cover, I normally would, unless it's specific and creatively makes sense, I'm more likely going to go for the original or for a re-record of that as a way to keep it authentic. But so I guess the Beatles.
Yeah, I think working in marketing, it's definitely more of a sensitive area for big known artists. So I have my list that in my mind of people that I wouldn't go out for. And if I see a cover come through, I know like, okay, I can't pitch that. I'm going to get in trouble because my creatives are going to love it. And, you know, they're going to want to clear the doors or something, and I'm just not going to do it.
The big artists are usually, I mean, you can sort of listen. Have you heard that song out in the world before? You can kind of get a sense. Red hat over here.
Yeah, I have a question. So I write from the artist, but if you have, like, I have a bunch of songs with a licensing company or agency that's repping them and then songs somewhere else, but it's under the same name, but they're exclusive to those. Is that cool, or is that confusing that, like, you have to go to different people for the same artist brand?
Not at all. If I want the song, it doesn't matter to me, but
I guess I'm saying, like, in your system, is it, like, separate enough that, like, you always know, like, who sent you what, how to clear it? I'm just a dumb artist.
It gets confusing.
I just want to know what y'all do, because all I do
No, that's a great point, because we get a lot of from the same artists from different pitchers. So I think if the same song, it gets really confusing. I'd say, you know, be exclusive with one pitcher if you can.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I can speak to this because something came up recently where it was like, this is a really good example for like why you should be exclusive. But basically, so with trailers, like we are a different, so we're like technically marketing. There was a music supervisor on this one film that we worked on called Not Okay. And there was a French song that was used in the film that was cleared by the music supervisor. We ended up using that same song in the trailer, and we went to our point of contact person who was different than the licensor that the music supervisor went to for the film. And we had been working with this person for months on trailerization, customization. They basically, went through the entire process with us. We had included them on the cue sheet all along. But then when we delivered the cue sheet to the clearance person, that clearance person went to their contact person, which was the person that they cleared the song for the film. So our person actually got kind of cut out of that money. And, it was a situation where, it was really unfortunate because we had put them on the cue sheet. We wanted them to get paid. We wanted them to get compensated. But the artist had non-exclusivity. So...
Yeah, I would say try to, as an artist, stick with one picture for that artist brand. If you're a writer, maybe you're different places, but it's kind of a disservice to the people pitching your music. There's a relationship there, too, between the artist and the pitcher. And I get all the time, like, hey, I pitched this. I want to make sure I get my credit. So you should really just have one person. So if that song ends up in a show, that person is getting the credit. That will make your pitcher want to work harder for you, trust you. So I don't encourage people to shop around songs like that. I think it actually hurts you in the long run. If you're going to do it, yes, at least keep the songs different. Don't have the same song with different pitchers. And that confuses music supervisors, honestly. I don't think it helps you get more looks. I think it just confuses everyone and makes people think you're kind of up to something. So I would say
it's going to be a problem to clear later on.
Yeah, like what's going on here?
Flag.
So if you don't like your pitcher, get a new pitcher, but don't have 6 pitchers pitching your music for you. My suggestion. I think we can do one more. So who wants to end it? Right here.
I have a piggyback question.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, so as another dumb artist, I know the value that I bring to a specific genre and style, and right now I'm trying to find specific sync agencies, libraries, and stuff. But there's so many out there. There's all these boutique agencies, all these sync reps. It sounds like you have a relationship with a certain amount. Like, how does a composer or a songwriter choose their representation properly as an exclusive?
Yeah, we could, if I'm an artist, how do I choose a pitcher, which could be a whole panel for sure. But let's maybe quickly go through any quick suggestions.
Find a company that matches what your offering is. Find a company that you connect with and certainly see what their placements are. And are they getting placements in the areas that you're interested in, film, TV, or otherwise?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Find a pitcher who has a roster where you would be a good fit. When I am thinking about which reps to reach out to, I think, this person has a lot of this stuff. So it's actually, I feel like, if you're a licensing rep, it works in your favor to have a specialty. Thank you.
And find someone that believes in your music and is going to pitch it hard, and like, I really like this, or I have other bands like this, because, they could have 50 people on the roster. So find someone that you feel is going to really, put your music out there. Do we have time for one more? Or are we done? Or one more? Okay. I think we're in the back yet.
Can you drill down a little bit more on lyric searches that you had mentioned before? Like you mentioned like a friendship lyric brief that's a minute ago and something that's not related lyrically. Across the different promos to the shows or to trailers, what works lyrically? Like what's too on the nose, what's too gone versus.
Yeah, that's a good one. The question's about lyrics. Are they too on the nose? Do we care about lyrics in our pitches, or is it more about the music and we can be talking about gorillas and it's fine, but maybe speak on that.
For me, it's actually really important, and it's been such a lesson as I've started with All Rise, which is a show on CBS with a strong Black female lead, Simone Missick, and then now with Amanda Warren on East New York, and a few other strong female leads in between, all representing the outliers, a different way of approaching something. And I'm asked for music, the general hip hop, rap, and I'm like, that covers so much. And I'm on a network television show, so I can't have a lot of words that would be authentic to how someone would be creating a song. So that's where, for me, really getting into the specificity and working with people, and every single lyric has to be poured over by CBS. I get comments all the time, and, oh, I missed that one F word, or, you know, so it's very important, but it's also important that it can't be too generic. So I'm in a really tricky situation for me in terms of lyrics.
Do you put lyrics in your brief? Like, I want, or like lyrics about friendship, or I want these exact lyrics, or do you?
I tend to put lyrics, say things that cannot be talked about in mine, just because it's specific to the kind of shows I'm working on.
For trailers, we pretty much need the chorus to be like exactly on the nose, which is weird because in film and TV, you don't really want it to be on the nose. But we're like, no, it has to be like this. You know, you have to say what it is you're going to see in the movie, which is hard.
Yeah, it's similar for promos. I do try to think outside the box and think of, like, I'll give some keywords that aren't just exactly like family, but they're related terms that could help. And I always encourage people to send me back things that are kind of outside of the box or related, like in that arena, but not necessarily saying the word family.
Well, I'm in advertising, so I'm in the world of like everything's happy and positive and good, and life is great. I'm walking on sunshine. There are a lot of artists out there making songs about that, and somehow it just doesn't always sound authentic. It's weird. I don't know. I work on projects that specifically need to speak to like togetherness or whatever the concept is, but I think what works best for advertising, or what tends to get placed the most, are those songs that kind of have like broadly positive lyrics that are kind of impressionistic. You know, they're just not like saying anything really specific. They're just coming like, it's like a nice imagery. That isn't, it's not, you're not singing about anything that would be a disconnect from the concept, if that makes sense.
Yeah, if you want to pitch lyrics and you're too afraid they're on the nose, just put a note. This might be on the nose, but again, it's building that relationship. It's us trusting your taste. But I mean, I've used, especially in reality TV, the editors love on the nose. So I'll even say in pitches, this should be really on the nose, you know, high heels with a picture of high heel, you know. So it just depends on the project. Typically no, but there are cases where on the nose works. Should we wrap it up with that? All right. Thank you all for attending. Thank you, panelists.